His voice cut through the quiet like a chainsaw. "You violated our setback rule, Mrs. Miller. That fence is illegal." The words echoed across my yard, bouncing off the newly stained boards that still smelled of cedar and fresh paint. I froze, my gardening gloves half on, staring at the man marching toward me with a clipboard clutched in one hand and pure arrogance in his eyes. It was Gary Holt, the HOA president, the man everyone in Maple Glen whispered about but no one dared confront. He was red-faced and puffed up like he owned the street, barking orders before I could even speak. The morning sun caught the shiny gold HOA badge pinned to his polo shirt, the one he wore like a sheriff's star. "You've built this fence too close to the property line. It violates Section 8, Paragraph C," he barked, waving a crumpled sheet of paper in my face. "You have 48 hours to take it down or face daily fines of $200. I blinked, confused. The fence had gone up just 3 days ago. It wasn't even finished. Half the post still unpainted. My neighbor's dog had been tearing through my flower beds for months, and this fence was my peace of mind. I'd spent weeks saving for it, measuring every inch against the plat map the builder provided. "There must be a mistake," I said quietly, my voice shaking. "This fence is right on my property line." Gary smirked, that thin, knowing grin that told me he'd already decided who was right. "Our board approved the property survey years ago, Mrs. Miller. You clearly didn't bother to check with us before you started construction." His tone was condescending, like a teacher scolding a child who should have known better. The absurdity of it hit me all at once. I'd worked 12-hour hospital shifts all week, slept 4 hours a night, and poured every bit of my weekend into building this fence with my brother. Now this man was telling me it didn't belong here? The air around us felt heavy, sticky with tension. Birds went silent, as if even they didn't want to interrupt him. "Maybe you should come inside," I said finally, forcing calm into my voice. "I can show you the deed and the plat map." He laughed, a sharp, dismissive sound. "No need. The HOA has already reviewed your violation. You'll receive the fine notice this afternoon." Then he turned to leave, his khaki shorts swishing as he stomped back toward his golf cart parked at the curb. I just stood there, hands trembling, staring at the fence that had brought me so much pride only hours ago. My son, Eli, peeked out from the window, eyes wide. "Mom, what's going on?" he asked. I swallowed hard, not wanting him to see how rattled I was. "Nothing, sweetheart, just a misunderstanding." But inside I wasn't so sure. When Gary's golf cart disappeared around the corner, I dropped to my knees beside the first post, tracing my fingers along the cool, smooth wood, the faint scent of varnish mixed with the earth below, grounding me. My stomach knotted as I remembered how careful we'd been, how the builder had checked the county map twice before we dug the first hole. I wiped the sweat from my forehead and went inside. The deed sat in a manila folder inside my filing cabinet, folded neatly beside the original plat map. I spread them across the kitchen table under the morning light. There it was, clear as day. The property line ran exactly where my fence stood. Exactly. I stared at those black ink lines, my pulse thudding in my ears. If I was right, Gary wasn't just wrong. He was lying. But why? What did he gain from tearing down my fence? Outside, the wind picked up, rustling the fence boards like they were whispering secrets. I pressed my palm flat against the map, tracing the lot boundary one last time before folding it carefully back into the envelope. "Something's not right here," I muttered, and deep down, I knew this wasn't just about a fence. It was about power, and Gary Holt had just picked the wrong homeowner to push around. The next morning, I was sipping my coffee on the porch when I heard it. The crunch of tires on gravel, followed by the sharp click of a clipboard. I looked up, and there they were. 3 HOA board members standing on my lawn like a firing squad. Gary was in front, of course, puffed up with authority, flanked by 2 others in matching polo shirts, all staring at my fence like it was a crime scene. "We gave you 24 hours, Gary barked. "Move that fence." The heat hadn't even burned off the morning dew, but his face was already red with anger. His voice boomed so loud the mailman paused halfway down the street. My stomach dropped, but I forced a calm smile, even as my heart thudded against my ribs. "Mr. Holt, I told you yesterday." My builder followed the property line exactly. I checked it myself against the county map. He smirked, leaning back slightly as if savoring the show. "Well, Mrs. Miller, our HOA documents say otherwise. Either you take it down voluntarily, or we'll fine you until you can't afford to ignore us." His words carried the cold precision of a man who'd done this before, who'd enjoyed doing it before. The other two board members said nothing. One, a nervous-looking man with gray hair, kept his eyes on the grass. The other, a woman I recognized from the last neighborhood cookout, couldn't quite meet my gaze. It was as if they knew this wasn't right, but none dared contradict him. I took a slow breath and stepped closer, holding my ground. "Gary, I've lived here for 4 years. I've never broken a single rule. I painted my shutters the exact shade approved in the handbook, planted HOA-approved trees, and even attended your meetings. But this?" I pointed toward the fence. "This is on my land." He crossed his arms, eyes narrowing. "Your land?" He chuckled, the kind of low mocking laugh that made my skin crawl. "We'll see about that." He turned slightly, his gaze flicking past me toward the clubhouse down the block. The one with the freshly paved walkway and the new stone patio the HOA had built last year. I followed his glance, confusion tugging at me. What did my fence have to do with the clubhouse? "Gary," I said slowly, "why do you keep looking over there?" He didn't answer. Instead, he clicked his pen and started writing something on his clipboard. "Expect another notice this week," he said flatly. "And this time, the fines will double. Maybe that'll get your attention." Something in his tone sent a shiver through me. This wasn't about rules or regulations anymore. This was personal. As they turned to leave, I caught a faint murmur. Gary's gravelly voice, just low enough that he must have thought I couldn't hear. But I did. "She's sitting on part of our land," he muttered. The words froze me in place. Our land. What did he mean by that? I stood perfectly still, watching as they climbed into a white SUV with the HOA logo on the side. The engine roared to life and the vehicle rolled slowly down the street toward the clubhouse, the sun glinting off the windows until it disappeared behind the trees. I stared after them for a long moment, my coffee cooling in my hand. The quiet of the neighborhood settled back in, but something inside me was awake now. Something fierce. If Gary thought I'd roll over, he was wrong. I'd worked too hard for this home, too long to be bullied out of what was rightfully mine. I walked back to the fence, tracing my fingers along the top rail. The morning light made the wood glow gold, solid and certain, a symbol of the boundary I knew was real. But Gary's words kept echoing in my head, that smug tone wrapping around me like smoke. "She's sitting on part of our land." For the first time I wondered, what if this wasn't just about my fence? What if something much bigger was hiding beneath those property lines? I didn't even change out of my scrubs. The moment I dropped my son off at school, I drove straight to the county records office with my deed clenched in one hand and a pit forming in my stomach. My mind replayed Gary's words on a loop. "She's sitting on part of our land." It was like a splinter I couldn't stop picking at. The morning sun glared off the windshield as I pulled into the government parking lot, my nerves buzzing like static. The records building was as dull as bureaucracy itself. Beige walls, flickering fluorescent lights, the faint hum of old printers. A worn-out public land records sign hung crooked over the counter. I walked up, heart pounding, and slid my deed across to the clerk, a kind-looking woman with silver hair and reading glasses perched on her nose. Her name tag read, Patricia. "I need to see the original plat maps for Maple Glen subdivision," I said, trying to sound calm. "Especially Lot 42, my property." Patricia gave me a patient smile, the kind of smile that said she'd seen her share of frustrated homeowners. "You're not the first person to ask about Maple Glen," she said, typing into her computer with steady fingers. That development's had more boundary disputes than I can count. That didn't comfort me. She led me through a maze of file cabinets and pulled a dusty drawer open with a screech. The smell of paper and age filled the air. Here we are, subdivision maps from 1998, 2007, and the 2015 amendment. She laid them out carefully across the counter. The black lines and parcel numbers looked like a tangle of confusion at first, but I recognized my lot immediately, a rectangle tucked against a common green area. Patricia pointed at it with her pen. This is your original boundary. Looks like the HOA filed for a variance in 2015 to expand that clubhouse area. See this shaded portion? I leaned closer. My pulse kicked up a notch. The shaded portion overlapped the back corner of my lot. Wait, I said, frowning. So the HOA expanded their land into this section here? Patricia adjusted her glasses. Well, they requested a variance to do so, but… She flipped through the next folder, scanning signatures. It doesn't look like it was ever approved by the County Planning Commission. What? She slid a paper toward me. The variance request. My stomach turned when I saw the signature scrawled at the bottom. Gary Holt, HOA President. He signed this? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Patricia nodded slowly. It happens sometimes. HOAs file internally but forget to finalize through the county, or they assume approval when none's given. Legally, the county maps are what matter. Always verify HOA maps here, not through their own copies. That line hit me like a spark. Always verify HOA maps at the county office, not through HOA copies. I traced the boundary lines again, comparing the original 1998 map to the later ones. It was subtle, almost invisible unless you looked closely, but over time, the clubhouse area had crept further and further into what was legally my property. By the most recent drawing, nearly 15 feet of their land, the patio, the walkway, and a small storage shed, all crossed my line. Patricia looked up at me with quiet sympathy. You might want to have your property surveyed professionally, she said. Just to be sure. I nodded, though my mind was already racing ahead. Gary had stood in my yard yelling about my fence while his precious clubhouse sat on my land. The hypocrisy was enough to make me laugh if I weren't so furious. I thanked Patricia, gathered the maps, and walked out into the bright afternoon sun. The papers fluttered in my hand like the wings of something alive. Proof of the truth I'd just uncovered. Sitting in my car, I unfolded the oldest survey one more time and stared at the overlapping lines, my pulse thrumming. The realization settled over me slow and cold. That clubhouse, I whispered, barely believing the words leaving my mouth, sits on my lot. I caught the red glow of a camera lens outside my window. At first, I thought it was a reflection, maybe from the streetlight or a car passing by. But when I leaned closer, my stomach dropped. The light blinked, slow and deliberate, aimed directly at my living room. Someone was watching my house. I yanked the curtain shut and stood frozen in the dark, my heart thundering in my ears. For a few long seconds, all I could hear was the hum of the refrigerator and my son's soft breathing from down the hall. Then, footsteps. Quick, muffled, retreating down the gravel path beside my house. The next morning, I found a fresh envelope in my mailbox, another HOA violation notice. Mailbox exceeds height regulation, it read. The irony almost made me laugh. The mailbox had been the same height since I moved in, but the letter was signed, of course, by Gary Holt. Over the next week, the violations kept coming. Improper trash bin placement. Weeds exceeding 3 inches. Unapproved landscaping material. Every day, another bright yellow envelope appeared. It was like they were watching for the smallest excuse to break me down. At first, I tried to brush it off, to act like it didn't get under my skin. But the neighborhood began to change around me. Neighbors who used to wave started crossing the street when they saw me. The elderly couple next door stopped making small talk altogether. Even the kids who used to play basketball in my driveway suddenly disappeared. The silence was suffocating. One evening, as I sat on my back porch trying to calm down, I heard it. A faint mechanical whir above my head. I looked up and there it was. A drone hovering just above the fence line, its blinking lights pulsing red and green like tiny eyes. It floated in place for a few seconds, then drifted slowly toward the direction of the clubhouse. My skin prickled. I grabbed my phone and snapped a photo before it disappeared over the trees. When I checked the image later, I could clearly see the logo stickered on its side, Maple Glen HOA Security. That was the breaking point. I wasn't paranoid. They were really watching me. The next morning, I went straight to the police department and filed a report. The officer on duty listened carefully as I explained everything. The violations, the surveillance, the drone. He raised an eyebrow when I mentioned the HOA's involvement. We've had complaints about that neighborhood before. He said carefully, if they're using surveillance equipment without your consent, that's harassment. Keep documenting everything. When I got home, I ordered my own security cameras, 4 of them, motion activated and recording 24/7. I installed them around the house that same night, determined to catch whoever was sneaking around. But as I stood in the dark yard tightening the last bracket, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was already watching me. The cicadas were loud, the air thick and still. My hands were slick with sweat as I aimed the camera toward the streetlight, the same direction I'd seen that first red glow. Inside, my phone buzzed. I wiped my hands on my jeans and checked the screen. Unknown number. I hesitated, then opened the message. Drop the fence issue, last warning. My fingers went cold. I reread the text 3 times, my pulse hammering. No name, no number, just that chilling threat. I looked toward the window again, the same one I'd caught the red light through. And for the first time since this started, I realized this wasn't just about harassment or rules. This was control. Someone wanted me scared, silent, and obedient. And that's when I made a promise to myself. They wanted fear. I'd give them fight. You're lying, Gary screamed, slamming his gavel so hard the sound cracked through the room like a gunshot. The crowd gasped. Papers fluttered. Even the old ceiling vent rattled from the force of it. My hands tightened around the folder of documents in front of me, but I refused to flinch. I'd waited weeks for this HOA meeting. Weeks of harassment, fines, and whispered threats. And I wasn't about to back down now. The community hall was packed that night. Every folding chair was filled. Every wall lined with curious neighbors clutching their HOA newsletters like shields. I could feel dozens of eyes on me as I stood near the microphone. The air smelled faintly of coffee and tension. My voice trembled only slightly as I began to speak. I have official records from the county office, I said, lifting the papers high enough for everyone to see. According to the plat maps and variance logs, the HOA clubhouse extends more than 15 feet onto my private property. Gasps rippled through the room. Someone whispered, 15 feet? Another muttered, that can't be right. Gary cut me off instantly, rising from his seat like a judge ready to hand down a sentence. This is ridiculous, he barked. You don't understand legal descriptions or boundary adjustments, Mrs. Miller. You're a nurse, not a land surveyor. The condescension in his voice made my blood boil. Maybe not, I said, keeping my tone steady, but the county assessor does. And these documents are signed by their office. I held up the stamped survey report like a weapon. The murmurs grew louder. A few people craned their necks to see the paperwork. Gary's face went red, a deep, furious shade that crept up from his collar. This meeting is not about your fence, he said through clenched teeth. It's about community compliance. You're out of order. He tried to slam the gavel again, but someone from the back shouted, let her talk. Others nodded. The crowd was shifting, the controls slipping from his hands. For a brief second, he looked panicked. Your clubhouse sits on my lot, I said, louder this time, the words steady and final. And the proof is right here. The silence that followed was electric. Even the air conditioner seemed to hold its breath. Gary's jaw twitched and he leaned forward, his voice low but venomous. Do you know what happens to people who spread false claims about this HOA? I stared back. Do you know what happens when people lie to the county? That was it. His composure shattered. You're lying, he roared again, slamming the gavel until one of its handles splintered. A child in the front row started crying. The vice president of the board, clearly mortified, leaned in to whisper something, but Gary brushed him off and stormed toward the back exit. His footsteps echoed down the hallway as the door slammed behind him. For a moment the room was silent except for the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. Then, like a small ripple in still water, someone began to clap. Then another, and another. Before long the sound swelled into full applause. I didn't expect it. My throat tightened, my vision blurring just slightly, but I nodded in thanks. Not all of them believed me yet, but enough did to shake his hold. As I gathered my papers, a frail hand reached out from the front row. It was Mrs. Dwyer, the elderly board member who'd sat quietly through every meeting since I'd moved in. Her eyes were kind but sad, as if she knew something no one else dared to say. She slipped a folded note into my palm. "Be careful, dear," she whispered. "You're right. Check Survey 78. Before I could ask what she meant, she turned away. I walked out into the cool night air, the crowd's murmurs fading behind me. Under the streetlight, I unfolded the note. Inside was a single line of shaky handwriting, and below it, a rough sketch of a map. I traced my finger along the line that connected my backyard to the clubhouse lot. The date in the corner read 1978. My breath caught in my throat. Whatever this was, it went back decades. His GPS unit beeped 3 times near the clubhouse steps. Tom frowned and glanced down at the screen, the sunlight glinting off its cracked display. "Sarah," he said slowly, eyes narrowing as he double-checked the coordinates. "This isn't HOA land." For a second, I thought I'd misheard him. We were standing on the neatly paved walkway in front of the Maple Glen Clubhouse, the same place where Gary hosted his smug monthly meetings, where residents gathered for wine tastings and pool passes. But Tom Rivera, the licensed surveyor I'd hired, didn't look uncertain. He looked stunned. We'd been at it all morning. He'd shown up right on time, boots laced, a weathered ball cap pulled low over his brow. His calm professionalism immediately put me at ease, a stark contrast to Gary's bluster. "We'll start at your corner pin," he'd said, unrolling the county survey documents Patricia had helped me find. "Then we'll trace your boundary clockwise. We'll see exactly where your line falls." I followed him through the backyard as his GPS device beeped rhythmically, marking each corner. The autumn air was crisp, the smell of cut grass mixing with the faint hum of machinery from the nearby clubhouse. Every few feet, Tom paused, checked his data, and adjusted a small orange flag in the ground. When we reached the fence line, he stopped and crouched, comparing his readings to the digital map on his tablet. "Your fence is perfect," he said with a grin. "Right on the property line, maybe even a hair inside. Whoever built this knew what they were doing." I almost laughed with relief. "Tell that to my HOA." He chuckled, then stood scanning toward the clubhouse. "Now let's finish tracing your boundary." We crossed the small grassy slope leading up to the back of the clubhouse. My stomach twisted tighter with every step. It felt wrong being here, like trespassing. Except, as it turned out, I wasn't the trespasser. Tom stopped near the concrete stairs, his GPS unit emitting 3 sharp beeps. He frowned and paced a few steps forward, then back again, watching the readings shift slightly. Finally, he looked up, brow furrowed. "Sarah, you're not gonna believe this." He turned the tablet toward me. The digital boundary line glowed red across the screen, slicing right through the middle of the clubhouse patio. I stared at it, my mouth going dry. "No," I whispered. "That can't be right." "Oh, it's right," he said quietly, crouching to remeasure. "Their back wall is 15 feet over your legal property line. This entire corner, the stairs, the shed, part of their retaining wall, it all sits on your land." The world tilted for a second. The clubhouse that had been the HOA's pride and joy, the one they'd find me over and over to protect, was built partly on my lot. Tom took a photo of the readings and saved the data to his report. I'll mark the exact encroachment on your survey map, he said, professionalism never wavering. This isn't a gray area, it's trespassing. Doesn't matter if it's an individual or a corporation. If a structure crosses your line, it's still your property. I blinked, trying to take it in. The hypocrisy was staggering. They'd called my fence illegal, fined me, threatened me, all while their multi-million-dollar clubhouse was standing on stolen land. Tom packed up his equipment and gave me a reassuring nod. You'll want this documentation certified and filed with the county, he said. And maybe keep it under lock and key. As he headed back toward his truck, I lingered on the walkway, staring at the clubhouse doors. For years I'd walked past this building, never knowing part of it was mine. Tom turned once more before leaving, his expression thoughtful. You technically own part of their building, Sarah. The words hit like thunder. Quiet, but unstoppable. I looked back at the patio, that polished stone and glass facade Gary had boasted about endlessly, and felt something shift inside me. I wasn't the one breaking the rules anymore. They were. You think you can outsmart me? Gary shouted, storming across my lawn like a man possessed. His face was the color of a stop sign, his fists clenched at his sides. The sun caught the sweat on his forehead as he stomped toward me, every step an accusation. I was standing by the mailbox, sorting through bills when I saw him coming. No golf cart this time, just pure fury on foot. Good morning to you too, Gary, I said, forcing a calm I didn't feel. My voice came out steadier than I expected, but my hands trembled slightly behind the stack of envelopes. He didn't bother with greetings. You've gone too far, Mrs. Miller, he hissed. That so-called survey you pulled, it's fraudulent. That man you hired is a con artist. I checked his license. I almost laughed. Tom Rivera's a state-certified land surveyor with 20 years of experience. I verified him before I hired him. Something you should have tried before accusing me of breaking your rules. His jaw twitched. He was shaking now, not from fear but rage. You're spreading lies, damaging the HOA's reputation. His voice carried across the street and curtains in nearby houses fluttered as neighbors peeked out. Gary, I said slowly, taking a step forward, the only thing damaging your reputation is the truth. The county maps confirm it. Your precious clubhouse sits on my property. 15 feet of it. He stopped dead in his tracks. For a brief second, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Not anger, but fear. Then he leaned closer, his breath sharp with coffee and bitterness. You don't know what you're getting into. You think one little report changes everything? You'll regret this, I promise you. From across the street, I noticed 2 HOA board members standing near the corner. Mrs. Dwyer and the nervous gray-haired man who'd been with him before. They weren't saying a word, just watching. I met their eyes, silently daring them to speak. Neither did. One simply turned and walked away, his shoulders slumped. You should be careful throwing threats around, Gary, I said evenly. Especially when the law's not on your side anymore. That did it. He pointed a finger in my face, trembling with fury. You're finished here, do you hear me? You'll never win. I held his gaze. I already have. He stood there another second, chest heaving, then spun on his heel and stomped away, muttering curses under his breath. His SUV screeched as he tore off down the street, tires spitting gravel behind him. For a long moment, I stood frozen. The air was thick with tension, the kind that doesn't fade right away. Neighbors slowly closed their blinds. My mailbox lid clanged shut in the wind. I took a deep breath and went inside, locking the door behind me. That night, after I put Eli to bed, I sat at the kitchen table going over Tom's survey report again. I'd already made copies, one for my lawyer, one for the county clerk, one locked in my safe. But no matter how many precautions I took, a knot of unease sat heavy in my chest. Around midnight, I heard it, the sudden crack of breaking glass. My heart jumped. I ran to the living room and found the window shattered, shards glittering on the carpet like frost. A rock lay among the pieces. Taped to it was a torn scrap of paper with 2 words written in thick, angry strokes. Enough. My throat went dry. I grabbed my phone and called the police. Within 20 minutes, an officer was standing in my living room, flashlight sweeping over the damage. He took photos, bagged the rock, and jotted down notes while I explained everything. The threats, the drone, the fight with Gary earlier that day. When I finished, he sighed, closing his notebook. "You're not the first homeowner to complain about him," he said quietly. I stared at him, the words hanging in the air like a warning and a promise all at once. I opened my bank app. 0 balance. My breath caught. I refreshed the screen, thinking it had to be a glitch. Then I saw it. Lee and Hold, Maple Glen Homeowners Association. My hands went cold. The HOA had actually frozen my account. For a full minute, I just sat there staring at the numbers that weren't there anymore. The house was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. Eli was at school. The sun poured through the blinds, warm and steady, but my chest felt like ice. The HOA, Gary, had gone from threats to outright financial warfare. I called the bank immediately. The representative's voice was calm but clipped. "A lien has been placed on your property by the Maple Glen HOA. It's listed under unpaid fines and community penalties totaling $7,400. "Penalties for what?" I demanded. She hesitated. "I can't say, ma'am. You'll need to contact the lien holder directly." I hung up, shaking, not even angry at first, just stunned. I hadn't missed dues, hadn't broken any real rule. The fines had to be fabricated. I pulled up my email and scrolled through weeks of digital notices. Defamation of the board, disruption of HOA operations, property damage to common structure. Property damage? I hadn't touched the clubhouse. The rage came slow, then hot. Gary was trying to strangle me financially, make me surrender before the truth could spread. I opened the HOA portal and scrolled through the violation log, reading each absurd entry one by one. He'd fined me for creating division, for harassing board members, and for filing false claims. That's when I remembered something the police officer had said the night of the rock incident. "You're not the first homeowner to complain about him." I started digging deeper. Under the governing bylaws, I found a clause I'd overlooked before, a single paragraph buried beneath pages of legal jargon. No punitive fine or lien may be enforced against a homeowner without prior hearing and recorded board vote. There had been no hearing, no vote. Legal nugget. HOAs can't enforce retaliatory fines or liens without a fair hearing. I printed everything, bank statements, notices, the bylaws, and shoved the stack into a folder. Then, on impulse, I reached out to the one person Gary couldn't silence, the press. The local news site, North County Watch, had a reporter known for exposing crooked HOAs and shady developers. Her name was Megan Shaw. I sent her an email with the subject line, "HOA filed illegal lien, I have proof." She called me less than an hour later. "Sarah, I just read your message," she said. Her voice was low, steady, professional. "You said they built a clubhouse over your property?" "Yes," I said. "I have the county survey, certified by a licensed surveyor, and now they're trying to bankrupt me." There was a pause. "You'd be surprised how often this happens," Megan said finally. "Send me everything you've got. Maps, violation letters, photos, all of it. If what you're saying checks out, this isn't just a civil issue, it's a corruption story." By the time I hung up, I felt the first flicker of hope I'd had in weeks. For once, the power shift wasn't in Gary's favor. I wasn't just one homeowner fighting alone anymore. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table, scanning the clubhouse photos again, zooming in on details I'd never noticed before. Concrete seams, foundation lines, construction dates. The blueprints I'd gotten from the county files didn't match the structure standing there today. Something about it was off. My phone buzzed just after 9 p.m. Megan's name lit up the screen. I answered immediately. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Sarah, you won't believe what's under their clubhouse." My blood ran cold. "What do you mean under?" She hesitated. Let's just say the county's construction records don't match what they actually built. I'm sending you something right now, but be careful who you show it to. The line went dead. My phone chimed. One new email. And for the first time I realized, this fight wasn't just about my land anymore. It was about what they were hiding beneath it. Cameras rolled as Gary stormed out of the clubhouse shouting, "You'll regret this." The veins in his neck stood out like cords, his voice echoing through the parking lot. The news van's side door slid open and a cameraman followed him, lens focused tight, catching every ounce of his fury. And for once that rage wasn't directed only at me. It was being broadcast to everyone in town. I watched from my driveway as the scene unfolded. The North County Watch van parked under the oak tree near the entrance, its logo gleaming in the late morning sun. Reporter Megan Shaw stood beside it, perfectly composed despite the chaos, microphone in hand and a small smile curving her lips. Her team had arrived just as Gary was, attempting to chase them off HOA property. "You can't film here," he'd shouted when they approached. "This is private land." Megan had simply tilted her head, calm as a surgeon. "Actually, Mr. Holt, part of this private land belongs to Mrs. Sarah Miller." Then she gestured for her cameraman to roll. It was surreal watching it play out in real time. The bully who'd tormented me for months, caught mid-tantrum, his words recorded for the evening news. My phone buzzed non-stop as neighbors texted screenshots from the station's live stream. HOA president explodes during investigation. The story hit the airwaves that night. Megan's segment was crisp and damning. In a stunning discovery, new county survey data confirms that the Maple Glen Homeowners Association clubhouse was built more than 15 feet onto a private residential lot owned by homeowner Sarah Miller. Despite repeated warnings, HOA leadership continued to fine and harass her, even filing a questionable lien after she uncovered the truth. Images flashed on screen. My fence, my deed, the survey map glowing red across the clubhouse foundation. Then came footage of Gary, jaw clenched, shouting no comment as he pushed past reporters. The fallout was instant. By morning, my phone was buzzing with calls from neighbors who'd once avoided me. "Sarah, I had no idea," one whispered. "He's been threatening everyone." Another, a young father from 2 streets over, admitted Gary fined him for hanging an American flag too close to the curb. Petitions started circulating online. Calls to dissolve the current HOA board, demands for an audit, requests for Gary's resignation. Someone posted drone footage of the clubhouse patio with the caption, "Stolen land, stolen power." It went viral overnight. For the first time in months, I felt the tide shift. I wasn't just fighting alone anymore. The whole neighborhood was waking up, but I also knew Gary wasn't the type to back down quietly. He'd built his little empire on control, and now it was slipping through his fingers. I scrolled through the HOA bylaws again, this time focusing on the financial sections Megan had mentioned. That's when another truth hit me. Legal nugget: misrepresenting land ownership can void an HOA's nonprofit status. If the clubhouse sat partly on private property, then every event, every meeting, every dollar collected there had been conducted illegally. By that afternoon, local social media was a battlefield. Hashtags like mine of Free Maple Glen and Miners Gary the Gatekeeper were trending. Residents posted videos of Gary pacing outside the clubhouse, barking into his phone, refusing to answer questions. The smug certainty he once carried was gone, replaced by panic. Then, just before sunset, a white county truck turned onto the street. The words "Department of Land Management" were stenciled on the side. 2 officials in reflective vests stepped out, pulling measuring equipment from the back. My breath caught as they walked straight toward the clubhouse steps. I stood on my porch, watching the scene unfold, the air thick with silence. Neighbors peeked out from behind curtains, some even stepping onto their lawns to watch. The officials started marking the ground with bright orange stakes. Gary emerged from the clubhouse, face pale, jaw tight, whispering harshly into his phone. But this time, his words didn't carry power. One of the officials turned to him and said something I couldn't quite hear, but the look on Gary's face told me everything. This was no longer just my fight. The county was here now.